Welcome back to Stories Sustain Us, where we dive into the inspiring journeys of those who are making a lasting impact on our world. I'm your host, Stephen Schauer, and today we have a wonderful guest, Concetta Bencivenga, who is a New Yorker through and through. Concetta's story is one of resilience, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to sustainability and public service. Growing up, her childhood was profoundly shaped by the unexpected passing of her father, a moment that brought her closer to her mother, brothers, and extended family. This early experience of loss and support laid the foundation for her deep sense of community and purpose. Her journey took her to Thailand with the Peace Corps, where she learned invaluable lessons in leadership, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of knowing when to step back and let others take the lead. These experiences, combined with her education at the LBJ School of Public Affairs, solidified her passion for public finance and policy, a passion that has driven her career ever since. From making a significant impact at the Children's Museum of Philadelphia to preserving a national historic landmark, Concetta has always understood the importance of humility and collaboration in leadership. She also has a deep appreciation for the role of public transportation in shaping cities and connecting communities. This is a theme we'll explore in depth today. Through the power of storytelling, Concetta tells us how understanding the history of transportation infrastructure can provide insights into the development of our cities. Her vision for a more sustainable, equitable future is grounded in the belief that sustainability is not just about the environment, but about every aspect of life, including transportation and urban development. She's also a strong advocate for supporting local transportation museums, like the New York Transit Museum, which plays a vital role in preserving and promoting the history of public transit. Now, let me tell you just a bit more about Concetta Bencivenga before diving into the interview with her. Concetta became the director of the New York Transit Museum in January 2017. Prior to joining the New York Transit Museum, she was the assistant head of school and director of advancement at the Ideal School of Manhattan and served as the executive director of Generation On, the youth division of Points of Light. Prior to that, Concetta was the executive vice president and chief financial officer for the Please Touch Museum, which is the Children's Museum of Philadelphia. An alumna of both the Noyce and Getty Leadership Institutes, Concetta holds a bachelor's degree in history from Loyola University and a master's of public affairs from the Lyndon B. Johnson School at the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I first met her almost 25 years ago. Now, get ready to explore Concetta Bencivenga's incredible journey, her insights into leadership and sustainability, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for our cities and communities here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. All right. Well, Concetta, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hi, Stephen. Good to see you too.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me on Stories Sustain Us. I really appreciate you being here. So it's good we haven't seen each other. I think we kind of talked off screen a little bit, but we haven't. It's been 23 years, over 23 years, probably
23 years
since we saw each other. So good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend.
Yeah, the best part of social media maybe is with all its downsides. The best part is that you can still see them living their life. And I've enjoyed seeing some of your travels and some of the great work you're doing in New York. So thanks for joining me here today.
Oh gosh, likewise. It's sort of one of the nicer parts of the social media, as is this, right? I haven't seen you in 23 years, but now we're having a chat like we're still back in Austin. So
yeah, right on. Well, you know the format of the show, so we're gonna start to get to know you, Concetta. So what's your story before we jump into some of the transportation and sustainability issues that you're working on this day? So what's your story, childhood to present? Let us get to know you better.
Golly, all right. Well, I'm a New Yorker. Let's put that out there. I'm born and raised in New York, right outside of the city. I grew up on Long Island. Sort of the arc of my life has sort of been impacted by some things that happened that I think have lent themselves to my work because both my parents were teachers, and my dad passed away very unexpectedly when he was 38, leaving my mom to raise all four of us by herself. I mean, with a lot of help. It does take a village, and I have an incredible extended family. And I remember actually, we'll fast forward a little bit, but when we were in grad school together, I remember actually having a professor who was a prior administrator of Social Security. Yeah. We received survivor benefits. And so I went up to him and I said, I just want to say thank you because we got that check. And my mom said, we're going to the no frills aisle. And that's, we got groceries. And but really, sort of despite that kind of trauma, stuff you can't, stuff you get handed that you have to kind of.
It's life. Yeah.
It's life, right?
Yeah.
Super
sympathies
fortunate.
Nevertheless, though. I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry
thank you
to learn that about your past.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I had a great upbringing. My mom's amazing. My brothers are great. Just super grateful for all the experiences that I had. I can remember standing in line to get the 2-for-1 tickets to go to Broadway, and kind of, my first opera was literally sitting in the last row of Lincoln Center, hitting my head on the ceiling because I was standing on the chair trying to see,
Yeah.
So, it was very, we were really rich in love and adventure and experience and things like that. So, all good. College at Loyola College in Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's a great, now Loyola University. Yeah. And then.
What were you studying there?
History and political science. So I was a history major and a political science minor. I'm a big believer in, if I remember correctly, this is your background as well. I love small liberal arts colleges. I think that they are, so great. And when people say all the time, well, what are you going to do with that? I said, well, how about you learn to think critically and write well? How about we just start there?
Start with some basic skill sets. Yeah.
Right. So I loved my 4 years at Loyola. Yeah. Volunteering had sort of been a constant theme in my high school and my college years. And so when I graduated from college, I joined the Peace Corps, and I served in Thailand as an English teacher for 2.5 years. And then I also developed a curriculum for 7th grade girls, which is an HIV, but also really kind of like reproduction, sexual health curriculum that was developed. I knew enough to know that I could not speak on any of that because it would have been culturally inappropriate. And so it was sort of a teacher training model where we got Thai health educators to train our teachers. And then they had this camp for kids. And that camp, I don't know that I was the best English teacher, but that camp actually went on to be a nationwide model that was used throughout the Kingdom of Thailand. After I left, I didn't know that happened until a couple years after I had left. And pretty great to have one impactful thing to have said you were done.
Yeah, no kidding. I knew you were a Peace Corps. I remember that, from our time together in grad school. I knew you were a Peace Corps alum, but yeah, that's a fantastic story, and impacting the world that way. That's amazing.
It was great, and I didn't know that had happened until a couple of years later when I was working for. When I came back, I worked for Peace Corps stateside for the federal government, and I was a recruiter and a recruitment coordinator. And then a couple came in and they wanted to serve together. He had been in Nepal, she had been in Thailand. And then, my name's obviously not common. And so she said, hey, did you do, that? And I said, I did. And she said, that's used all over the, and I was like, I need a minute, sort of. So I had no idea that it actually had scaled up like that after I left, you're sort of planting seeds and hoping, but
that's a great story. Exactly. I like the analogy of planting seeds. I mean, we just go around kind of doing the best we can to make our area, our community, our place a better place, and doing your job in that case. And it just grew into something much bigger than you imagine. That's beautiful. That's
for
wonderful.
Sure. And there's some really good. I think there were some good leadership lessons. Like I wrote the grant. I think maybe I got like $1,000 from USAID. I made sure there was enough food. I sort of was like, hey, how can I help? Kind of got the pieces together. But to me, the biggest leadership lesson of that experience is to learn when to stand down, right? And to basically that is not my lane. Yeah. So I'm gonna make sure everyone has enough water and that there's good food and that you guys, and that it was a good program. I mean, I definitely had actually, this is a harbinger of things to come because this woman who was the doctor, she was a Thai MD who had gone to medical school in Texas. I should have known I'd end up in Texas. And so she did the training. And so I kind of could, work with her and make sure that everyone was, on the same page. And it turned out really great. Lots of leadership lessons. And
Yeah.
to me, the big takeaway from that is even when you believe in something, maybe sometimes, especially when you believe in something, you have to know when you stand down and you let somebody else speak and carry the torch because it was more culturally appropriate.
Yeah.
For them to lead, right?
An important lesson. Absolutely. Particularly when you're dealing with culturally sensitive issues. It's can get pretty ugly if someone doesn't understand that or respect that or see that. So that's a wonderful lesson.
So,
I couldn't agree more with it.
It was great. And I came home and I worked for Peace Corps for 4 years as a recruiter and the recruitment coordinator in New York City. We actually our offices were at Six World Trade. So I worked there for a bunch of years. And then I wanted to go to grad school. And so I had looked into an MBA or public policy. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm not going to be a millionaire. So let me just sort of see what are the best policy schools in the country. And at the time, LBJ was fourth.
Yeah.
So it went Maxwell, which is Syracuse, Harvard, Princeton, and us, LBJ.
Yeah, I did the same research.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I was like, all right, well, let me just hedge my bets, and I'm going to apply to the 4 best schools in the country, and we'll see what happens. And I did not get into Harvard or Princeton. Apparently, I'm not Ivy League materials. Fine by me.
Their loss.
Thank you. But I did get in with a full scholarship to both Maxwell and LBJ. And so it would have been free in any case. So I was like, all right, well, let me go to Austin.
Yeah.
And I went down there. I was invited down the second annual Barbara Jordan Memorial Forum that they had. So I went down for Barbara Jordan weekend. And, again, now you know a little bit more about why this would resonate with me, but I can vividly remember being young, sitting in my room in New York, watching a Democratic National Convention with Barbara Jordan in a wheelchair, giving this speech, and you could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
And so as a young person, I just remember being like, who is that? And how do I learn how to, right? And lo and behold, come to find out she taught half of Houston and she taught at LBJ. And so, again, I feel like a little bit the stars aligned when I went down that weekend. And that, as you know, the Barbara Jordan Memorial Forum is really just to kind of highlight and elevate her life's work and what she was passionate about. And so I met a lot of cool LBJ students, and I was like, I'm moving to Texas.
Yeah.
So
Similar. I did not apply to all top 4. I researched the top 4 or 5, and since I was in San Antonio at the time, I was like, I'm just going to apply to the LBJ school. It's just up the road, and thankfully, that one application worked. But I visited it once, not on the forum weekend, but just kind of like in the middle of a week, and they let me sit in some classes and went to lunch with some of the current students at the time, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is where I need to be. These are my people. These are people that care about the world around them, and maybe not going to be millionaires because that's not their drive. Their drive is to make the world a better place, and get to meet people like you there. So that was why I went. That's exactly why I went.
Yep. And actually, thinking of this conversation, it's funny for me. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit, about sort of like my sustainability journey.
Yeah.
And it started at orientation at LBJ. So, it's sort of been interesting to think back on that and be like, wow, that was 1999.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we graduated in 2001, and then I had done my PR. I had done my professional report on. Because I had to go to math camp and I was completely terrified of math, right? Nobody was more surprised than me that I had this love of finance. And so, I remember taking, Colonel Matt Wazak's class because he was an Army colonel, and I was more afraid of him than I was of math and, all the things. But then I got into the public finance world, and I was like, gosh, I love this. And this is so important. It's just to sit in that intersection of like, okay, there were such smart people we were in grad school with. And
absolutely,
I had every confidence that we could probably noodle and come up with a cure for a public ill. But if you can't figure out how to pay for it.
Yes.
Right.
That was I think the number one takeaway I got from my time there is, that question being asked in multiple classes, what's the best policy? And like people giving out policies about how to do this and how to do that and how to do that. And the answer is, the best policy is the one that gets funded.
Right.
Yeah. And there's like, oh yeah, kind of true. If it just is an idea that sits on a bookshelf, then it may be better in merit, but it's not the one that's actually going to get implemented.
Right. And so I left LBJ with so much gratitude and just the head exploding with all these ideas and this sort of new, what I thought was my new trajectory, which was to work in public finance. And so I was hired by a company that I had done research on my professional report. And they were like, well, you want to come be a consultant? And I love the company and I liked the engagements. I always giggled because they would send me, this is a little bit of an East Coast joke, but there are certain pockets of cities up and down the Eastern Seaboard that are disproportionately Italian. Yeah. So all of a sudden I got assigned like New Haven, I got assigned Providence, Rhode Island. I was like, why are they sending the Italian girl up But what I learned about myself, which I think is a really important life lesson as well, is sometimes it takes the absence of something to let you know that you place a premium on it. Mm. And what I learned is I'm a joiner, right? Like I would make a friend in New Haven and finally know where to get lunch, and that's it. Yeah, we're done. The engagement's over, And so I lived in Philadelphia for a year and a half before I knew where to get a cup of coffee because I wasn't ever there. Yeah. Right. And so even though it was a good company and I liked the work, and I liked what we were able to do to kind of go into these municipalities and try and help correct for things that needed to be corrected for. Very much an extension of what we had learned in grad school. Yeah. I was personally not really happy. And I realized, you need to actually be part of an organization. And so I kind of was looking around, and this is, hand to God, it's a true story, monster.com. That's how long ago it was. There was an ad for a chief financial officer for the Children's Museum of Philadelphia. And now right, based on, even though sort of the optics of me, I've got all the letters after my name and the degrees, that I came from limited means. Arts and culture made a huge impact on my life, right? Yeah, and so I was like, I could do that. I could do that job. I wasn't an accountant. And I put my stuff together. It's a little crazy in retrospect, but I did. And sure enough, it just so happens that the woman who was the executive vice president of the museum at the time, this is Please Touch Museum in Philadelphia. Yeah. She was just exasperated because she had been through, I don't know how many accountants, and they had kind of came in and were, kind of opining about everything that she was not doing correctly. So, and she's passed now, but she would tell you this, like on a lark. She just saw my resume and was like, I'm just going to call her. And so she just called me up and we had a chat and it was great. And, I said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm working on. I really kind of, I love arts and culture. So she was like, yeah, you're going to come in for an interview. I was, I think, 31 or 32. Yeah. And so I came in, I had an interview, and like in retrospect, it's absurd. The whole thing is absurd, right? But we had a really great interview, and she said, okay, I'm going to introduce you to the CEO of the museum. And both of these women, Nancy Call was the CEO, Laura Foster was the executive vice president, are lionesses in the entire American museum field writ large, but specifically in the children's, they are just legendary, right? Yeah. So I can't imagine the looks that must have been exchanged between Laura and Nancy, but I went and met Nancy, and Nancy was sort of like, I mean, okay, I guess. So she gave me an assignment. She said, listen, I'm going to give you all of our, 990s and our audited financial, this is 501c3 tech, financial information. Yeah. Come back in a couple of days. Tell me what you think, right? Yeah. So, Stephen, what did I do? I made a PowerPoint, which is, the joke about grad school is going to grad school is learning how to do a PowerPoint and do group presentations with people you may not like. That's it. You get a master's, right? That's it. So I came back a couple days later and I had a PowerPoint and I was like, all right, let's just walk through it. And I pointed to something. I was like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this? Like, help me understand this and da-da-da-da. Yeah. And then Nancy said later, the very first time I said, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this? I was hired. Yeah. Because I was the first person that had come in and wasn't like automatically issuing an edict. I was like, my frame of reference was, maybe I'm not seeing this. Help me understand.
Yes. Yeah.
And they didn't care that I was 31 and not an accountant. They were like, that's her.
Yeah.
So they hired me, and I worked there for 9 years. I was the CFO, and then I ultimately, Nancy retired, Laura became the CEO, and I became the executive vice president. And we saved a National Historic Landmark and moved a museum and all this crazy stuff. It was an incredible chapter. It really was amazing. And then
so two things real quick before you
sure,
go. Yeah, because it just triggered on two things I want to mention. First, another great lesson I think you just gave the audience about humility. Leadership doesn't mean you know all the answers. Doesn't mean that you come in, telling everybody what to do. It's being self-aware enough and humble enough to go, I don't know that I know that. So what a great lesson, and a story that's what got you hired, is that you acknowledged you needed more information, you needed some help. Brilliant, beautiful lesson there. And now tell me which national landmark you say, because that you just blew over that, and that sounds like there's a story there too.
There totally is. So there's a place in Philadelphia. Now, let me just also own, I lived there for over a decade, and I'm still a Giants fan, and I'm still a Mets fan, and that is not easy to do in that town.
Yeah, yes,
Right?
I was picking up on that too. Being a New York girl, that being in Philadelphia or Boston for you probably tweaks you a little bit.
Yeah, but I will say this though. This is a complete sidebar, but it's actually a true statement. Yeah. It's the most sport knowledgeable town I've ever lived in my entire life. It's just it's not even close.
Yeah.
And also, even though they would give me massive amounts of grief, they respected the consistency, and so there's a lot of respect for sticking with your teams. But it also is a place that for lots of reasons, it doesn't get a lot of the sort of, the kudos that it deserves. Well,
sure.
Everyone, this is sort of the joke. Everyone knows about the Chicago World's Fair because that's the birthplace of, architecture in the United States. And it's but actually the one before that is the Philadelphia World's Fair, which is the site of the centennial celebration, 1876 centennial celebration. It is immediately in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's the time where the Union, it's kind of this just unifying moment for the country. It's also the first kind of marquee time where other countries thought like, okay, we could go there now because we don't know what was happening before, but we'll visit,
sure,
know.
There's some stability there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a massive success. And the Centennial Hall, the Centennial building, is in the same category of significance because it's where America came to celebrate the 100 years.
Yeah.
As the Statue of Liberty. Which also, by the way, the arm and torch of the Statue of Liberty, much to my chagrin, was displayed at the World's Fair before it was in New York Harbor. So don't think that they didn't tell me that it was in Philly before it was in New York, which is true.
I didn't know that piece of history, so thanks for educating me.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's this just hugely historically significant building, but it had been really kind of had 20. It was the first, for a very brief moment, the first Philadelphia Museum of Art, and then it had every bad use from Tuesday, including at one point training facility for the police academy. Like, don't ask, right?
Oh,
like
wow.
sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
So it could have used some TLC, and we got a 99-year lease from the city of Philadelphia for $1.
Yeah.
We gave them 100 pennies in a sippy cup, which, as one does when you're a children's museum.
That's brilliant.
And then we fixed it, and I remember the architects telling us that it had about a year and a half left before it would not be salvageable.
Yeah.
So we got in just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
And I can also remember, this is a little off color, but the first check I wrote, which was not for a little bit of money, it was for tens of thousands of dollars, where it was for guano removal.
Yeah.
Because that's how,
That's what that's kind of disrepair it was in.
Yes. And it was a lot of guano, and there was a lot of hazmat suits. And I was like, wow, who knew that the first check I would write would be for pigeon and other, vermin.
Yeah. Yes.
Poop removal. But.
Yes. One of us had to define that just in case somebody didn't know what that was.
It's basically pigeon poop removal, and raccoons and rabbits and whatever else was in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was in Philly for a good while. And then I wanted to come home to be closer to my family in New York. And so I moved back home in 2012 and worked at a couple of different nonprofits for a couple of years. And then in 2017, this job came up, which is to be the CEO of the Transit Museum in New York. And it's interesting because one of my brothers said to me when the job was up, they said, my family calls me Annie. They're like, Annie, like, who's gonna have a public policy degree and a museum background? I was like, well, that's a really good point, right? And so the New York Transit Museum is a public-private partnership between the MTA and a 501c3.
And the MTA, for folks who may not know?
Yep, it's well, you can see around my office. It's the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and so that is what operates New York City buses, subways, bridges and tunnels, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North Railroad. And just to put that in context for you, the single largest commuter railroad in the United States and the oldest still operating under its original name is the Long Island Railroad. It has been in existence for 180 years, so from 1834 till today. The second largest commuter rail in the United States is Metro North Railroad. So both of those entities are home to the first and second largest commuter rail systems. And then obviously the iconic New York City subway and buses and bridges and tunnels. Yeah. So that's what the MTA is. And then there's a Friends of the New York Transit Museum group. And I've been here for almost 8 years. I've been here for 7.5 years.
Nice.
Now you're all caught up.
I am all caught up. Thank you for that, bringing us up to speed on your life. And I love the fact that your career to date and certainly what you're doing now, but certainly what I heard in the story was the lasting impact that you had in the Kingdom of Thailand, and the lasting impact that you had in Philadelphia. And knowing you as I think I do, you were just doing your job, to do the best job that you could do, to be a public service, to make those communities and those places better through your work and through your actions. And it wasn't, imagine, like you were thinking, I'm gonna do something that is going to be remembered for years and years and years on. It's just, you just did your job and you did it well, and you made this incredible impact, literally around the world. And I love that. I love that. So yeah,
I'll try.
Yeah, no, more than try. You're doing it. You're an example of how to do it. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
So tell me a little bit about what life is like now. What, these last 8 years, tell me a little bit about what you do there. And then I definitely want to talk to you a little bit about, public transit and sustainability, that nexus that's such an important, has been an important, and certainly I think going forward into the future needs to be an important part of our future discussions. So what's life like now for you as, the person responsible for running the New York Transit Museum?
Yeah. Well, first, everyone can come visit. It is a lot of fun. And it is a beloved institution. Our origin story is bananas in the best way possible. We're part of this sort of cohort of 1976 museums. So as we get ready for our 250th anniversary, a word I cannot say. People have tried to tell me 5 million times how you say it. I'm like, I'm just going to pass and say our 250th. But there's a big cohort of museums that were started in 1976, and we are one of them.
Yeah.
The museum was started at the height of New York City's fiscal crisis. There's that famous sort of Ford to City drop dead kind of newspaper cover, where it was going to be days away from being one of the largest municipal bankruptcies in U.S. history. So we had no money.
Yeah.
But we were also wanted to figure out how to celebrate the bicentennial, and so a group of transit workers, literally men that worked at transit, knew about this sort of 1936 decommissioned subway station here in downtown Brooklyn and said, like, hey, can we do like a transit exhibition for, the bicentennial? And for whatever reasons, we'll never know why, they got permission to be open for 3 months. 3 months. So it was only ever supposed to be open from the 4th of July, 1976 to Labor Day, 1976.
Yeah.
And 48 years later, we're one of the largest transportation museums in North America. And we're one of the few transportation museums in the world that has rolling stock, which is buses and subway cars, that goes out on their originally intended lines.
Wow.
So I have a 1917 subway car that will go up to Yankee Stadium every opening day.
No
and it
kidding.
picks people up at Grand Central, takes them to Yankee Stadium. I'm usually on the ride. I'm a Mets fan, but I go anyway. And it's great. We
Dedication
have these,
to your job.
That's right. But we have these, this rolling stock, the oldest car in our collection is from 1904, 1907.
Wow.
Right. So we've got this incredible history of both surface vehicles and transit subway cars as well. And we basically, kind of writ large, when you come to New York, if you live here, if you visit us, what I say all the time is you experience New York the way you do because of mass transit. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
And those are the stories that we tell here.
Yeah.
And so the thing I like about my job, a lot of times people are really chagrined. They're like, oh, God, I've never heard of that place, or I've never been there. Fine by me. Because when you go to the Met, you know what you're in for. But 9.5 times out of 10, people leave our museum and go, oh, my God, that place was awesome. I had no idea, And so it's a really fun position to kind of occupy in terms of arts and culture in New York City, which is, as you can imagine, an incredibly competitive landscape to be in.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the before times, before the pandemic, in 2019, we engaged with over 700,000 people a year. And that is through the main museum space in Brooklyn. We have a gallery annex in Grand Central Terminal. But then also we do activations out and about in the system. We have a bus festival under the Brooklyn Bridge. We do a parade of trains where we take out our vintage fleet. So in all kind of manner of engaging with audience, we were in excess of 700,000 audience members in 2019.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. And then, the pandemic came and
things happen. Yeah.
Right. We got clocked like everyone else. That road to recovery has been long for like it has been for most museums. But last year we did just north of 460,000 in attendance. And this year we're trying to kind of close that gap as much as possible.
Yeah. Get back up to pre-pandemic numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So things that we have going on this coming fall. We are going to celebrate the 120th anniversary of the subway, which is with a huge exhibit that is coming up. And
when is that?
So that opens on September 25th. Opens to the public September 25th.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. We're recording this a few weeks from now, but this is going out on September 24th. So this is tomorrow. Nice.
Yep. So that's our opening reception is tomorrow the 25th, and it opens to the public on Thursday the 26th. And then that'll be up for a year. And it's a really great exhibit. It's not timeline. You can go online and Google the timeline, but it's called The Subway Is.
Yeah.
And it just talks about all of the ways that the subway has transformed New York and what it's been to people. So we're really excited about that. That's a very exciting exhibit we have coming up. It's actually our first major exhibit in the space since before the pandemic, if you can believe it.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love kind of connecting those pieces for folks, right? And kind of connecting the dots and sort of getting to, I love the name of your podcast because it really is about stories, and we are rife with them here. I joke that I'm like the dad from a big fat Greek wedding. Give me anything and I'll tell you how it's related to transit. And it's true here. It's true. So.
Well, let me take you up on that because I want to circle back to something that you said a few moments ago about how people experience New York today is based on the history of public transit and how that shaped the face of today's city. So can you tell a story or two about some pivotal pieces of history that, people went left instead of right or up instead of down, and that little moment of decision making whenever it happened, helped create the city that you experience today because a subway line was put in or because a tunnel was made or whatever the stories that you want to tell. But if you could share a story or two about that significant moments of time that shaped the city that people experience today, that I think would be helpful to tie in that understanding maybe that people, I've never been to New York. I'd love to get out there sometime. I will definitely visit you in the museum when I get out there. But to know that little piece of history, that if that little hidden thing that nobody knows about, then the city today wouldn't exist the way it does. So
yeah. So I'll give you two that are not related to the subway, or sorry, and then I could give you 12 that are, but I think they're important. So, and I think they're sort of part of this larger kind of narrative about why transportation matters so much in the national conversation. And in this regard, it's sort of a good LBJ lesson. Like, you can have your opinion, but these are facts. These are the facts. Yes. The facts are what they are. And so a couple of years ago, I had to give a talk for visiting folks. Randomly, they happen to be from the U.S. War and Naval College, which is this sort of cohort of international naval, very senior military officials from all over the world, and they wanted to come to the Transit Museum. And I said, well, gosh, what's my hook for this group, right? How am I going to make it matter to them? And so the thing that really, this is the truth, and I'm a little bit obsessed about this, and I think it does really matter in the larger arc of a transportation narrative. Up until 1800, there are 4 cities on the eastern seaboard that are almost identical. They are Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. Yeah. They all have about 500,000 people. They are all significant ports of entry to the United States if you're coming from Europe. And they're about the same, really. Yeah. And all of them have the exact same problem getting to the interior of the United States, which is at some point, you're going to hit the Appalachian Mountains. And you're going to have to portage your stuff over the mountain range. Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's Boston, New York, Philadelphia, or Baltimore, right? Yeah. The only reason why we are having this conversation in New York City, the city that never sleeps, the city that is recognized as one of the financial capitals of the United States, and all the things that comes with it, is because of the Erie Canal. That's it. That is the only reason why. Because and they, so Clinton. They used to call it Clinton's Ditch, right? The Erie Canal it was like, this is absurd. This is the craziest idea. You're going to go up to Albany, you're going to hook a left, and you're going to dig a ditch to the Great Lakes. And he was like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And that's what happened, right? Yeah. And then you see almost instantaneously, New York becomes the port of record, period. Yeah. And so that's why the Midwest is not particularly middle, nor is it particularly west. But because when you take the Erie Canal over, this is what opens up the interior of the United States of America. It's the Erie Canal. That's it. Yeah. So everybody in the middle, you're having that conversation because of the Erie Canal. And we don't do a good enough job of sort of contextualizing it enough, right? For folks and saying like, Chicago, you're welcome. We dug a ditch and now you have Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was too much of a New Yorker about it, but you know what I'm saying? It's just sort of like, this is what happened. And right. And in the sort of the universe of unintended consequences, what happens when you are, everyone's coming to you, right? Now you're the locus, you're the focal point, and everyone is coming to New York. It is not fun to live on the island of Manhattan in the early 1800s. And also, we have to be super specific. When you talk about New York City before 1898, you were talking specifically and only about the island of Manhattan. And also, you are talking specifically and only disproportionately about the island of Manhattan below 42nd Street. So all of these people are crammed into the lower third of Manhattan Island. And it is not fun. It's just incredibly congested. It's not healthy. There are public health outbreaks. But if you go to, there's 2 rivers. There's the East River and the Hudson River. Yeah. If you're over by the East River side, you can literally look across the river and say, well, that looks kind of nice over there. How about let's get together. Let's go there. So they do. People organize a ferry, Fulton Street, the Fulton Ferry, and they start ferrying themselves from this incredibly densely populated lower Manhattan to Brooklyn. And Brooklyn Heights, right around the corner from where this museum is the first suburb in the United States. Yeah. It's the first time in an urban setting people decided, oh, no, we're going to work there, but we don't want to live there. We want to live there.
We're going to commute to work, right?
Right? So that's the first time in the U.S. that's happened, where people have sort of segregated. And actually, that becomes really important as we talk about the evolution of mass transit because of a couple of things. First of all, with the emergence of rail, steam trains were super loud, filthy, and they just emitted all sorts of ash and fire hazards and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, you've got all these people kind of crammed into the lower third of Manhattan. So the city passes a rule that says that is it. No trains are allowed in the city center. We're done. You can't pull your train into the city center. So everyone gets together and go, okay, great. We are going to take a place that's outside the city center, and we're going to put a train depot there. And you know where they picked? They picked 42nd Street. So what we refer to literally now as the crossroads of the world, there's a sign on 42nd Street that says crossroads of the world, was at one time deemed to be outside of New York City Center. So that's where they put Grand Central.
Yeah.
They put Grand Central at 42nd and said, okay, that's far enough away that the trains can stop there. But what happens? Transportation acts like a magnet, and within a nanosecond, the city just boop.
Grew
now
that direction.
Goes up to 42nd Street.
Yep.
And you see this happen over and over again. First with the emergence of, we had elevated lines in New York before there were subways, right?
Yeah.
And so when the elevated lines start to go up either side of Manhattan, neighborhoods just pop up, right? There's some NIMBYism. One of the biggest questions we get asked is like, how come there's not a subway around Fifth Avenue? Well, because the people that were living in the mansions did not necessarily want a subway, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit of NIMBYism that goes on,
Sure.
They kind of create these, and that's why very much so we talk about the subway as sort of the arteries of New York, because it just conveys people. And so Erie Canal, that's why we're having this conversation in New York.
Yeah.
Fulton Ferry, reinvented the suburbs.
Yep.
And then just the evolution of mass transit is, I'd love to say that it was all sunshine and roses, but time and time again, it actually was predicated by a really not great event.
True.
Right. And so the thing that got us thinking about a subway is actually called the Great White Hurricane of 1888. It was a fluke nor'easter. It was a blizzard.
Yeah.
It's one of the first times in U.S. parlance that we'd use the term blizzard. And it was really bad. People were stuck on elevated trains for a while, and a lot of people passed away.
Yikes.
And so there had been a lot of conversations juxtaposed against Tammany Hall and lots of sort of sweetheart deals and all that sort of stuff about building a subway. But the Great White Hurricane in 1888 was such a traumatic event for the city that it catalyzed them to say, like, we're going to go underground.
Yeah.
And then in 1900, we broke ground for the subway, and it opened October 27th, 1904.
Yeah. I appreciate in that little 5-minute span how you really summarized the significance of public transportation. I mean, just the literally changing the face of our nation, not just the what New York looks like, but how public transportation, the significance it has for our history as a nation, our history as a world for that matter. I mean, rail obviously has done a tremendous amount of good and some not so good things as it was spread around the world. But that public transportation piece is why we live not only in New York the way it looks today, but certainly the way we live in much of the world as it looks today. So thank you for so expertly and succinctly telling those significant milestones. I mean, those things are pieces of history that people need to know about. So moving into kind of today's context and the future of sustainability, what's your thought in the context of today's sustainability challenges? What role do you see public transportation playing going forward to make a sustainable and equitable future for all?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this conversation, as often happens, so much of my sort of starting point is LBJ, right?
Yeah,
and so my first experience, this is true. I believe that the first sort of like sustainability awakening I had was at LBJ orientation in 1999, sitting next to Madge Vasquez, right? Do you remember Madge? So smart, like just like whip smart. The brilliance of the people that we went to school with. I was like, I don't know how they let me in, but wow, these are smart people.
I felt the same way. Like, oh my gosh, how did I get in here?
But I'm so happy to be there, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So I had to go around and sort of say what we were interested in. And I think I remember what I said I was interested, but I definitely remember what Madge was interested in, because here's why. Madge said, I'm interested in water rights policy. Now, I grew up on Long Island. I came from the island of Manhattan. I went to college in Baltimore on the, Chesapeake or, down the, and I'd been in Thailand. So I knew a little bit about water usage from living in my farming village. But I literally sat next to her and I was like, what? Like, what is that? Like, and then come to find out that this is a massive issue for a very large portion of the country that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
I knew absolutely nothing about, right? And so for me, a couple of things. I knew I had made the right decision to kind of get off the Boston, D.C. corridor and go figure out what the rest of the country thought about things.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody was talking about water rights in Syracuse, but it's a huge deal in Texas, right?
Absolutely a huge deal. Yeah.
And it had never really occurred to me the impact that has on literally everything.
Yes, and throughout the Southwest, but Texas and a whole lot of states that are real strong on private property rights, water rights, drive an enormous amount of. I mean, we're dealing with laws that were 1800 era laws that are still determining how we live our life today.
Yeah. And so for me, like, I think about that a lot because that's the sort of beginning of the arc of me thinking about sustainability. And even though I've never really been in sort of straight line sustainability, if you will, it has episodically just been huge in the work that we do, right? When we say that, I know this will not surprise you, but I was at a conference and they were talking about LEED certification.
Mm-hmm.
This is a LEED silver. This is a LEED, all LEED certification.
Yeah.
And I was like, over here, the most environmentally sustainable thing you can do is save a building. How come you have no category for that?
Yeah.
We are keeping X amount of the landfill. And so I don't know that they appreciated the question, but it's true nonetheless, right? And
great question. Yeah.
It was sort of this glaring omission where they had thought about LEED, and I haven't kept tabs on it to see if it's evolved, but the very early sort of rollout of LEED, it was only new construction.
Right.
And so we qualified for nothing. Aside from the historical significance of the building, it's truly one of the most environmentally sustainable things you can do is to repurpose and reuse a building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I can remember kind of, getting into some policy tussles with folks about that back in the day, and so I think that my work is sustainability adjacent, but I would posit that almost everybody's work is sustainability adjacent.
Yes, that's the whole position of this show, is that everything humans do has a sustainable aspect to it. We can make sustainable choices or not, but in literally everything we do, we can be sustainable. There's ways we can do things better if we choose to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so how that impacts, the work that we do here at the Transit Museum, first, two of the most environmentally sustainable things you can do is live in a city and take mass transit, right?
Yep.
And so we are champions of public transportation. We believe that it matters. We live in a city that also believes in public transportation. Everyone gets to gripe about it because it's your birthright, but it matters to all of us as well, and we want to make sure that it works as best as it can. And then sort of when you live in very close proximity to people, you think of sustainability all the time. And when you live on an island in the face of rising seas and major storms, it is never, it's a double negative, but it's never not part of the conversation, right? There's always some sort of conversation about, well, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Right. Because we are experiencing climate events at a much more frequent pace than has been the case. And, when we kind of rewind over the 120 years of the subway, the crazy thing is that in the beginning, the biggest sort of pivot or kind of challenge was to try and convince people to go underground to get on a moving vehicle, right? Because before then, you went underground for two reasons. You went underground to go get something and come back up, or you went underground. Yeah. And that's it, right? And so the notion of sort of going underground and moving around was a little bit of a stretch for folks. But we were very early and easy adopters, and then it just became part of really the way that we live and breathe in the city. But now, 120 years on, we are underground on, 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 120 years on, we are underground 3 islands, right? Staten Island, geographic Long Island, and Manhattan Island.
Yeah.
So only the Bronx is part of the contiguous lower 48, the continental United States, right? Which a lot of folks don't think about. The
I don't
seas
think I
are,
knew that either. Yeah,
but
that's
think about it, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
absolutely. I never thought
Brooklyn,
about that. Yeah,
Queens,
yeah,
Manhattan, Staten Island, and the Bronx, right?
yeah, yeah,
Only one of them is part of the lower 48. The rest of
yeah.
us are on islands.
Islands. Yeah, yeah,
Certainly Long Island Railroad and that service community, Metro North and that service community, the bridges and tunnels and the high wind events, and it's a lot. It's a lot, and so there are massive portions of the MTA that are responding to all of the sort of like climate sensitivities and
yeah,
the rapid change. All of that is juxtaposed against a bunch of stuff that's underground below sea level on a bunch of islands.
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so it is part of everything we do. The move to electric vehicles for the surface transportation. Certainly the conversations about whether or not to implement congestion pricing here in New York, that is driven by, air quality, sustainability, traffic reduction.
Yeah,
These are all the conversations that we have, not all day, every day, but a lot on most days,
yeah,
are really kind of about what are we going to do? And it is sort of writ large a conversation about sustainability. But for us, and I do feel like in many ways, New York acts a little bit as the canary for better or for worse, as the canary in the coal mine, right? These are not hypothetical, theoretical challenges. These are real, present,
yeah.
day challenges that we need to kind of figure out what we're going to do. So
Yeah, it was what Sandy was, the devastation that brought to the community, and
so
the
we
real
will.
threat
I will.
to subways.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I will send you a link. I had nothing to do with this, so I can say this. I can say this emphatically.
Yeah.
My predecessor, when I arrived at the museum in 2017, had curated a show. It's called Bringing Back the City.
Yeah.
And it's about how transit responds to crises.
Yeah.
And there's an entire chapter on what happened during Superstorm Sandy. And it's incredible because it's a website. I can send you the link to the
please
website.
do.
You can
We'll
put it up
on the please.
And if you do nothing else, as it's related to sustainability, but also because this is September, there's a whole chapter on 9/11 and how they responded to that. And then there's also incredible first-person testimonials of what actually had to happen to get the system back up and running in the immediate aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. And that obviously was a huge inflection point, but it also, it's not like nobody was thinking about it before, but it did accelerate the way I know that teams made it real. And then also it was go time, right? Yeah. And so I know that the MTA dispatched teams to Amsterdam to kind of go see what we could learn from people who were living at or below sea level already. And so there's just a lot of really good work that's been done in this space about, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So
well, I think it's those, just like the winter blizzard made people open up their minds to changing from the elevated line to the underground subway system. Sandy's, I think, opening people's eyes. I know when I was back in Texas, for much of my career there, working in environmental sustainable issues in rivers and everything that I was doing there, Texas is a little bit right of center, you may have heard, politically in many areas, and there were certain areas in which we couldn't use the term climate change with certain elected officials because it would shut them down. They wouldn't want to have anything to do with you. So but Hurricane Harvey and the devastation it did it to Houston, that kind of started changing people's perspective. There's still undoubtedly people that are uncertain or don't believe that the climate is changing and that humans have a great deal to do with that. Certainly those deniers or folks that doubt it are still there, but it's those big storms and these big, sadly, disasters that cost life and enormous amounts of fiscal damage that start maybe opening people's eyes to, this is real. We do need to do something differently. We do need to think about different choices and how do we do things. So
the thing of it is that like you would think that watching what we watched during Katrina would have been enough.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, because my apartment where I live in the city is below 23rd Street. And so below 23rd Street, there was no power. So we were joking, we're like, oh, we're SoPo, south of power, right?
Yeah.
Soho, SoPo,
Yeah.
kind of, gallows humor.
Yeah.
But it was not great to be with that many folks without power for that many days.
Sure.
And my wish for everyone would be that you wouldn't have to have such a viscerally disturbing experience for you to get the memo, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my great hope, and sort of the go forward to whatever we do next is that, like, I taught a class at LBJ this spring, and the guy that I taught with, lectured in his class.
Yeah.
He's right of center, I'm left of center. He was saying, apparently in the 2000 election, there was a whiteboard, and, I was like screaming, and I was like, all right, we're going to go get beers now? And he was laughing, like, you got to fight the fight. You have to make your position, but we have to be able to get back to, I'm glad you think that way. This is established fact. So you can bloviate, but this is established fact, and we're moving on now.
Yeah.
And I would hope, my great hope for that would be that it wouldn't take a Katrina, a Sandy, a Harvey, a storm, to be named at a later date.
Yeah.
For somebody to really kind of get that message, that we can have enough faith in one another's lived and shared experiences to say, it's go time.
Yeah. Yeah. I share that hope with you. So, well, I want to be respectful of your time during this recording. I know you probably have some other business to attend to, but before we go, first thing I want to ask is what can people do now that they've listened to this or watched this, and hopefully are listening to what you just said about you don't have to wait for the disaster to happen to get into action. Like, what do you want people to do? How can they support your work in New York, or what do you want people to do wherever they may be listening to or watching to this? What's your words of advice or call to action for people?
I would say this. Well, first of all, from the museum's perspective, this is a true bona fide pandemic perk. And I'm not being facetious. This is really a good thing that actually came out of the pandemic. We do a lot of virtual programming right now. And we play with the times because we have people in Scotland and Japan and all over the world that really do like to listen to our virtual programs that we do.
Yeah.
And so if you believe in cities, urban agendas, transportation, if you like trains, buses, it doesn't really matter. I would really encourage you to go to our website, which is NY Transit Museum, and look and see what we have going on. Please come, and if you can't come visit with us in Brooklyn or New York City, then visit with us online. We have tons of great resources. If you're an educator, we have free and available to anybody, massive amounts of lesson plans that are just up there.
Awesome.
If you're trying to teach about, 5 million different topics. A lot of them are New York centered. We are the New York Transit Museum, but some of them probably could be adapted and applied to other environments as well. But they're also just really good resources for learning a little bit more about how New York was transformed by transportation. And then sort of more writ large, I would just sort of say that no matter where you reside, whether or not you feel like it matters to you personally, Erie Canal, Fulton Ferry, the suburbs that you're sitting in right now, many of you, all of it brought to you by transportation. And so my sort of great hope for things that are not related to the New York Transit Museum, but just are related to us in this incredible country we all get to call home is mass transit matters, and it matters to everybody. And even if you don't think it matters to you, it matters to you. And it matters for 5 million more reasons than we have time to get into today.
Yeah.
But it's really important. And it's something that ought to be a no-brainer. But we, owe to live in interesting times. And so support your mass transportation networks wherever they reside, wherever you reside, even if you never take one.
Yep.
One of the things I like to say, people, Long Island, well, I never get on the train. I said, well, you know what? Then you're welcome, because every day 200,000 people do.
Other people do, right? And
if they didn't, they'd be in their cars, making your commute longer. So even when you don't think it applies, it applies. So support mass transit wherever it is.
Yep.
And support your local transportation museums if you have one near you, because we're pretty special places, even though I'm biased.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll put your website, your New York Transit website, up on our show page so people can go visit you virtually, and then hopefully visit you in person whenever they're in the great city of New York sometime in the future. So
hold on, we got to do it.
Please.
No. We are not leaving without doing Hook 'em Horns. So we got to do.
Yeah. Well, we're not. I got some more questions, but let's do
more questions. All right.
Let's do the Hook 'em right now, or do you want to do it at the end?
3, 2, 1.
Hook 'em horns. Absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah, we
All right,
couldn't go
carry on,
without
Fred.
doing that.
Carry
All
on.
right, we can do it one more time later too. So, I end every episode. Thank you for your call to action, by the way, before I transition, and I want to thank you for that. And we'll put your information up on our show page notes, and absolutely encourage everybody to go visit you and support their local mass transit. I wholeheartedly believe with everything you just said about the significance of mass transit wherever you live. It is a benefit to you even if you don't use it. So support it, 100%. So last three questions I have for you. So stories sustain us. We talk about sometimes hard topics. We talk about storms and the damage that was done. So I want to leave every episode, kind of upbeat. I think we are upbeat. We just did Hook 'em Horns, so that's how much more upbeat can you be? But I want to talk to you about hope. Recognizing hope isn't a plan, right? But to get to the plan of action, to do something, you kind of need to have some hope that there is something to go towards. There's a direction. There's something that can be better in the future that gives you the drive to go move towards it. So it starts for me with this idea that there is hope for a better future. And hope, as defined by some of those who study it, is this idea that you can envision a better future and you feel you have some agency that you can do something to help it come to be. Kind of takes those two things to have hope. Doesn't mean it's not gonna be hard. Doesn't mean you're not gonna fail along the way. Doesn't mean you might not get there, but you got to have a vision for a better future and a sense that you can do something to get there. So I'm going to ask you three questions and kind of just go with your gut or top of mind, whatever your answer is. Don't think too long about it. Just give the answer. So the first question is, Concetta, what's your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally or professionally or for the world, but what's your vision for a better future?
Okay, I have two answers. Can I give you two
Please,
answers?
yeah, of course.
Is that all right? All
yeah.
Right. I, Jeff he graduated a year behind us. I didn't even remember that story, but my hope for our future is a time where we can agree to disagree, to tussle, and then to just go have a beer, right? Like to get back to that and remember who we are and to say, nobody said it was a perfect union and we're supposed to be driving towards a more perfect union. Well, in order to do that, you have to disagree with people sometimes, right? And so to me, the thing that gives me hope sort of writ large is I think this is the moment for everybody that's in the middle. There's a lot more of us in the middle of that bell curve. And we gotta, this is our time. This is our time to say, like, this is the path forward. I'll be left of center, you be right of center. I don't particularly care, but we're in the middle and we're going to go disagree about things and then we're going to grab a beer. So that's my hope for a new chapter for us to turn the page. And to a little bit, it's personal, but also organizationally. I cannot tell you how many tears I shed trying to get this museum through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And if any other person that runs an arts and culture organization says anything different, they are not telling you the truth. It was brutal. It was really, I mean, everyone had varying degrees, but, New York was particularly difficult.
Yeah.
And other places had it bad as well. But for me, anyway, this is probably the most challenging thing professionally I've ever been through, was that pandemic and being forced closed for 18 months and being in New York and just the waves of it and the never endingness of it. And what has sustained me was the notion that, this museum was founded on a wing and a prayer against the backdrop of the city being literally hours away from being just busted broke. And somehow it persevered. Yeah. Right. And so there were minutes, hours, days when I felt like we were just pulling it through. And I truly believe that the best days of this institution are ahead of us, that they are yet to come. And that is what gives me hope, is to say that we're just getting started, and I can't wait to see what happens for this museum's next 50 years. I won't be around for all 50 of it, but I plan on being around for a good chunk of it. And it's just, that's not nothing. To orient yourself and say the best is yet to come and there's good stuff ahead of us, especially if you're in the midst. I don't care if it's personal, if it's whatever trauma, if you can have that as your line on the horizon, that's not nothing. It's a lot more than nothing, right?
So second question, you got two visions for a better future, a vision where we can kind of disagree, but do so cordially and still go out and have a beer or dinner together or whatever afterwards, just still be civil to each other, even though we disagree. And your vision for the better future to come for the New York Transit Museum. So you kind of touched on a little bit, but the second question is, why is that your vision?
I don't know very many people who are content where we are right now, right? I just think we're better than that.
Yeah.
We're better. I believe it. Yeah, it's my hope, because I think we're better than that. People can do better. People ought to do better. We should strive to be better, and so I don't think any of these conversations are mutually exclusive. I think you can strive to improve whatever it is, and then you got to call an audible and be like, all right, wait, who did we leave out? All right, come on, let's go figure that out. Let's bring those people along. What we miss, right?
Yeah.
It's all of a theme, right? It's all sort of like being that 30-something-year-old person in Philadelphia and being like, okay, I don't get that. Walk me through this, right? It's all the same thing. You're sort of moving through life being like, all right, work hard, ask hard questions, hold people accountable, bring your very best. And if you're not bringing your very, very best, go fix it and bring back a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
And then leverage all that you have against whatever it is that's going on. Audible, who did we forget, what we leave out? Correct. Keep going. It's kind of the whole reason why we're here, right? Like that's sort of, it's kind of the whole reason why we're here. And I think that cadence can apply to everything.
Yeah.
Your job, your life, and it doesn't mean it's easy. And no. I think so many people, what I say all the time, my personal mantra, this is like super personal, because all of us have experienced loss. Mine was just a little bit front loaded, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I will say one swear word. My mom will be upset. It's all right. But my personal mantra, this is the truth, Stephen. My personal mantra is, this shit is really hard, and it's a privilege to get to do it.
Yes, I love the and. Yes, and. That's the way.
Where the grown-ups live, both things can be true.
Yes.
This is very hard.
Very similar to my personal mantra as well. That life is hard, and it's a beautiful place to be.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. This is really hard, and it's a privilege to get to do it, because there are people that would give a limb. Yeah. Right?
Love it. So last question. So vision for a better future, why it's important. Now imagine for a second we're in that future. People are living in a way where they can disagree civilly and trying to better themselves and better the community without, leaving others behind, making sure everybody's coming along. And the museum is just, we're at 1 million people a year visiting now, well beyond what pre-COVID numbers were. Like, your future is real. It's a thing. How do you feel?
I mean, this is sort of my great aspiration for now. And I'd like to be two things at the same time, always.
Yeah.
I'd like to be content, but still curious.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that.
Content.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, all right, like, that's the thing, is that, like, and anyone that's ever worked with me, like, there's all these funny sayings, and, people, I will never say anything about you that I won't say to you, which means we're going to have some hard conversations. I'm going to expect you to bring your best, like, all the time, because I'm going to do the same. Right. Yeah. So you be your best. I'll be my best. Sometimes we'll screw up. Life happens. You just keep going. Right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to be content to be able to look back and be like, all right, I left most of it on the field, and still curious. Like, all right, well, what else is there? What haven't I seen? What didn't I think about? What don't I know? Right. And so to me, that's like the magic elixir of life, really, to know that you left most of it on the field. You left everything a little bit better than when you got it, and you're still curious about what's next.
What's next? Love it. Well, Concetta, thank you so much for being a guest on Stories Sustain Us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your friendship. Appreciate knowing you and calling you among my circle of friends and grad school alum. So happy that life has just continued on an upward trajectory for you since we kind of shared our time in Austin. So Any last words? Give you the last before we
Thank you
shut
for having
down.
me. It's great to, this is one of my favorite things. It's just so great to be able to pick up like 20 years hasn't gone by, right? And say like, all right, what do you got? And I just am so grateful to LBJ and to you. And, it's such a gift. That grad school was such a gift. So,
it was.
So
absolutely.
Hook 'em.
Well, hook 'em. Yes, we'll end on that. Thank you very much, Concetta. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another inspiring episode of Stories Sustain Us. Please join me in thanking my guest, Concetta Bencivenga. Thank you, Concetta, for sharing your incredible journey with us today. Concetta's story is a testament to the power of resilience, humility, and the impact that thoughtful leadership can have on our communities and our world. From her childhood experiences to her time in the Peace Corps, and from her work at the LBJ School of Public Affairs to her transformative roles at the Children's Museum of Philadelphia and the New York Transit Museum, Concetta has shown us what it means to lead with purpose and compassion. Throughout our conversation, we touched on the historical significance of buildings, the critical role of public transportation in shaping our cities, and the urgent need for sustainability in every aspect of life. Concetta's insights into the challenges faced by the New York Transit Museum during the pandemic and her vision for a future built on civil discourse and collaboration have given us all much to think about. So as we reflect on the importance of preserving history, supporting local institutions, and making sustainable choices, I hope you feel as inspired as I do by Concetta's passion and dedication. Her work reminds us that the choices we make today will shape the cities and communities of tomorrow. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family, and subscribe, rate, and review Stories Sustain Us on your favorite podcast platform. Your engagement really does matter, so thank you for your support. Now, just before we go, while we're speaking of building a better, more sustainable future for all, I want to comment a bit more on public transportation and how it's critical to that ambition. Concetta and I touched on it a bit, but I want to emphasize the significance of public transportation to sustainability. Here are just a few reasons public transportation plays a crucial role in building a sustainable future for all. Public transportation can reduce carbon emissions. It can promote efficient land use by supporting more compact, high-density urban development, which helps reduce urban sprawl. It promotes economic accessibility. Public transit can reduce traffic congestion. Mass transit is generally more energy efficient per passenger mile than private cars. By reducing air pollution, public transit contributes to better public health. Public transit systems can be designed to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change, and it can encourage people to adopt more sustainable lifestyles. By decreasing the demand for roads, parking lots, and vehicle manufacturing, public transportation can also help conserve natural resources. And finally, public transit promotes social cohesion by bringing together people from diverse backgrounds, fostering a sense of community and shared space. To sum it up, public transportation is a cornerstone of sustainable urban development. It reduces environmental impact, promotes economic and social equity, and supports healthier, more resilient communities. So, as Concetta mentioned, even if you don't use public transit in your community, supporting, investing in, and expanding public transit is essential for creating a sustainable future for all. So once again, I thank Concetta Bencivenga for her time, her wisdom, and her unwavering commitment to a better, more sustainable future for all. Now, quick plug for next week's episode of Stories Sustain Us. I'm excited to share with you my interview with a Navy veteran who is now an award-winning documentary adventure photographer, filmmaker, and conservationist. He's an advocate for social and environmental justice, and through his projects, he connects the public to endangered lands, capturing the true essence of their peoples in moments of passion and the indomitable human spirit. This is really a great interview. This episode is something I've wanted to bring to you for a long time. I've known this gentleman for a number of years, and I'm really excited that he agreed to come on this program. So you're going to want to check it out on October 1st, wherever you listen to podcasts, and at storiessustainus.com. So, till next time, I'm Stephen Schauer. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.